Yeah. All right, guys. Just kind of as a heads up, we've got a little YouTube channel that's actually starting up for you guys. So if for some reason you're not able to make it, or if you kind of want to catch some things back after we've taught them, that's why I got this going. We'll do whenever we have a teaching time, we'll capture it live, and that way it's out there for you guys if you want to talk about it later, or you want to check out something, or like I said, if you miss a week, you don't have to miss all the different teachings and things that we do. But as we think about today, the first chapter of the letter to the Galatians, and we talk about why Paul wrote the letter to the Galatians, but really, I hope that as you read through the letter, if you've read through it, or as you do, that you sense that there's a real pastoral and kind of almost parental tone to it. I heard a guy say one time that every page of the Bible not only has text, it also has a tone. It sounds like something. And when you read through the letter, you'll see these little phrases from time to time. Some of them are really obvious, like in chapter 4, verse 11, or chapter 4, verse 16, or really chapter 4, verses 19 and 20. You can hear almost like a parental heart from Paul. It upsets him that the children in the faith, or the people that he had led to faith in the region of Galatia, had these false messages that were kind of getting perpetuated, and they were being distorted and kind of turned away from the heart of the gospel, the truth of the gospel. And in that turning, there was real damage that was being done in these communities. And in the midst of that damage, it broke Paul's heart. And you can hear that tone kind of come out, because anytime the shepherd sees any of their sheep being harmed, it's a difficult thing. It's a tough thing to swallow. And so Paul sits down and starts writing this letter so that it would circulate around this region, around the churches. And it really is a pretty radical message that Paul is reminding them of, this message of grace, that there is no one beyond salvation, that there's no one that isn't loved by God, that every single person, that God's gospel is not an exclusive gospel. Every single person is loved by God. And then really the means by which we enter into relationship with God is purely and simply through faith, that there's not a whole lot of activity you have to do. It's a belief element. Actually, the word for faith in some translations gets translated as the word trust. If you experience the grace of God, and if you trust that grace, if you trust that relationship, that is salvation, and that's the true gospel. And what we're going to spend the rest of the night kind of talking about is, who is Paul? Because I think he's one of those guys who's like, name gets thrown out there a lot. He wrote like most of the New Testament. The majority of the books in the New Testament were written by Paul. But not a lot of us know, or at least I didn't know in high school, like, who is Paul and why do we talk about him so much, and what's kind of his story? And that's really what you see in the rest of chapter 1 of Galatians. And some of these other kind of biographical sections come. We have Galatians 1 and 2, Philippians chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, Acts chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, Acts chapter 9 is really a significant moment in Paul's story. We call it, or it's called the Damascus Road experience. Paul was on his way to persecute a church in Damascus. He was on his way to imprison Christians that were meeting in this town of Damascus. And along that road, he has a revelation. He has an experience of the risen Savior. Jesus appears to him, knocks him off his ride, and he's laying there on his back. And Jesus asks him, "Why are you persecuting me?" And Paul goes blind in the midst of this experience, and he's sent up into Damascus. He has this radical conversion in Damascus. And the guy who used to be persecuting the church now becomes a preacher of the gospel message. And I don't know about you, but like anytime I see somebody who used to be like dead set one direction and then becomes like dead set the other direction, that creates some level of curiosity for me. Like if you knew somebody who was like diehard Cub fan last year, and then this year showed up in all Cardinals stuff, wouldn't you kind of like scratch your head like, how did that happen? Or like if you knew somebody who like every day all they ate was pizza. Like every single day at lunch, they pulled open their lunchbox and there was like a piece of cold pizza in there, and that's all they ate every single day. And then like one day they came in and they pulled open this lunch and it was like quinoa. Wouldn't you be like, wait a second, that's different? Well, that's kind of what happened in Paul's life. Paul was one way. He was born in Tarsus. He was of the tribe of Benjamin. He was advancing in Judaism. He was highly educated. He was passionate about what he believed. He was so passionate about what he believed that he was actually persecuting anybody who opposed what he believed. He was there at the death of some of the very first Christians in Jerusalem. He had studied under a guy named Gamaliel, and then he has this radical conversion, 180-degree turn, and he becomes a completely different person. And most of us don't talk about that a lot. We just kind of say like, oh yeah, Paul wrote this and Paul did that and Paul's this great apostle and Paul the missionary and Paul the pastor. But I want you to know, if God is going to get a radical message, a radical gospel out into the world, like what we see in the book of Galatians, that by grace we have been saved through faith, if he's going to get that type of gospel out in the world, a radical message is going to take a radical messenger. And I don't know if there's ever been a conversion or a transition or a turn more significant than Paul's. I mean, the way that he kind of takes a 180 is extremely radical. A radical messenger is delivering a radical message. And in order to get that messenger ready and able to deliver that message, God uses a radical experience, a radical revelation on this road to Damascus. And so here's what we're going to do next. For the time being, we're going to split up guys and girls. Ladies, we'll have you over here, and guys, we're going to go over here. But we're going to go back into Galatians chapter 1. We're going to pick up at verse 11 and read through the end of the chapter together. And we're just going to do a little chart down the middle of the page. On one side, we're going to do, who does Paul say he was before this radical conversion? Who does Paul say he was? What do we learn about Paul's background, his upbringing, his early chapters of life? And then on the other side, we're going to say, who did Paul become after he encountered the risen Christ? Who did Paul become after he had met Jesus on the Damascus road? And that's going to set us up for one last thing tonight, which is going to be a little one-on-one conversation that you can have with any of your friends that are here. So we're going to do girls over here at these tables, guys over here at these tables. We're going to create these little charts. And then from there, I'll tell you guys when we're going to shift and do some little one-on-one reflection time to end today. Got it? All right. Gentlemen over here, ladies over there.